Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Gemma Catolino, postdoc at Jeronimo's Academy of Data Science, and today the seminar of today will be about Community Smell 101. And the goal of this webinar is to present two recent work that I did in the context of community smell, and in particular two of the work presented at the International Conference on Software Engineering in 2020 and 2021. Of course, in this webinar, I will give you also some background information about community smells and their definition. But now let's start with the first paper that talk about refactoring strategy to mitigate community smell. But let's start with context of community smells. As you know, software development is a social activity. So the way developers communicate and collaborate with each other could affect software quality. And for this reason, software companies continuously fight with issues related to human resources. As a proof of this, we know that the 56% of software projects do not fail because of technical factors. Indeed, during software development, it might happen that some conditions create suboptimal organization and communication issues. And this is the clear definition of community smells, a set of social technical characteristics and patterns which may lead to the emergence of social debt, and that can lead to increased project cost. But let me provide you an example of a particular community smell. So you need to consider a development team as a community. So here there is a community, and it might happen that there is a member of a team that work regardless their development team. And this is the clear definition of the lone wolf effect. But what we know about community smells? Well, according to a recent study of Tamburi et al., we know that community smells regularly affect open source communities that are considered harmful for the sustainability of software projects, that developers sometimes deal with them changing the underlying community structures, and finally, that some socio-technical factors can predict the emergence. In our previous studies, we investigated which factor affect the presence of community smells, and in particular, factors related to team composition, such as gender, diversity, experience, team size. But after that, we decided to take action and propose refactoring strategies in order to mitigate and solve community smells. In particular, we focused on 4 different community smells, and starting from the organizational silo community smell that occurs when there are community siloed areas that do not communicate with each other except through 1 or 2 of their respective members. And here there is the schema of this community smell. As for the black cloud, this smell appears when there is an excessive information overload due to the lack of structured communication. The lone wolf I already explained you. And as for the radio silence, this smell appears when one team member interposes her or himself into every formal communication across 2 or more subcommunities. In order to extract our refactoring strategies, we conducted a survey, consisted of 5 main sections. One related to background, where we asked them, our participants, to tell us about gender, size of company, role, team size, and so on. And 4 sections that tell a story about a particular community smell. But it is important to know that we did not explicitly refer to, hey, this is a community smell. But, for example, here you can see a small story about the lone wolf. During the development, you recognize the presence of individual who carry out her or his work independently from the decision taken by the community. So after this small story for each of the community smell, we asked them, has this situation ever happened to you? And if yes, how did you address it? in total, we receive 76 answers, and in order to extract our refactoring strategies, we rely on the answer of the second question. In particular, starting from the text, the open text, the open answer, we rely on the grounded theory method, and we conducted 2-3 rounds in order to arrive from an open answer to a refactoring strategy. So until we arrived to the theoretical saturation, so the classification was complete. Let's move into the part of the results. As for the first question, has this situation ever happened to you? We count the number of yes or no. And in particular, we can notice that community smells are relevant. And so we can confirm also the result of the paper of Tamburi et al. An interesting result is about the lone wolf. Indeed, the 66% of the participants deal with the lone wolf and belong to a very large companies with 250 and 2,000 employees. As for the refactoring strategies, I don't have enough time to explain all of them, but I can tell you that all the refactoring strategies for each community smell makes a lot of sense with their definition. For example, as for the organizational silos, we notice that the most mentioned strategies is related to restructure the community. So in this way, you can avoid the polarization of 2 or more sub-communities that do not communicate with each other. As for the black cloud, that is a community smell related to a communication problem, the most mentioned strategies is to create a proper communication plan. As for the radio silence, the most mentioned strategies is to do several cohesion and mentoring exercising. And finally, as for the lone wolf, we see that the most mentioned strategy is talking with the lone wolf, so talking with the team members, as well as introduce a social sanctioning mechanism, so fire the lone wolf. We are aware that we need to confirm more these refactoring strategies, but this for sure is a first step toward the concrete heuristics to remove community smell and improve their detection.
Well, after the presentation of the first work, let's jump into the second part of this webinar, and in particular, I will talk about the second work that aim at understanding community smell variability. And in order to better understand again what was the rationale of this work, let's start again giving you some context about what we know about community smell and what we don't know. Well, previous study showed that community smells regularly affect open source community, and developers perceive them as harmful for the sustainability of software projects, and that sometimes developers deal with them, changing the underlying community structure. And previous study, very recent study, show how some socio-technical factor can predict their emergence. But what we don't know about community smell? Well, it is not clear how socio-technical factor can contribute to the variability of community smell. And for variability, we refer to the extent to which community smell instances increase or decrease over time. Of course, this study and the results of this study, possible estimating how change in this factor would impact the emergence of issue in the community, as well as derive additional aspects influence the phenomenon. So the design and the goal of our study was to investigate how previously identified socio-technical factors contribute to the variability of 4 well-known community smell, considering open source projects. And in particular, 60 projects, so 60 open source projects, 4 community smells like Lone Wolf, Black Cloud, Radio Silence, organizational silos, and 40 metrics. Of course, in order to understand if these metrics are correlated to the variability, we use a statistical approach. So let's explain more about the dataset. So the dataset was publicly available from previous study. So this dataset contains also the value of the community smell analyzed, as well as the metrics that we considered in our study. We have different time windows for each project, and these projects are different in terms of size, community, and programming languages. The 30 metrics considered, the goal of this metric is to better characterize the community of each project analyzed. Indeed, you see aspects about turnovers, social network analysis, and so on. About the community smell, of course, as I said before, we wanted to understand the variability. So for us, it's not important the number of a particular community smell, but we want to understand the variability. So if the number of community smell increases decrease. So what we did, based on the value of the community smell of the first time windows, we delayed this one and we compare the number of community smell with the second time window, with the second one. So in this case, we now understand that the number of community smell decreased. So the number 5 is replaced by the nominal value decrease. In the following, the value increase, so the nominal value will be increased. And if the number doesn't change, it's stable. So this represents our response variable in our model. In order to construct our model, we, of course, in this case, we were facing a multi-class problem since we had these 3 nominal values. So we use a multinomial logistic linear model, and we use our tool. Of course, in order to know more about all the detail of the script, you can go on the replication page. Okay, now let's move into the results part. So, as for the organizational silo, we notice that communication-related metrics can be helpful to reduce the variability, so the high variability of the smell. But on the other side, the increasing of the collaboration may be detrimental for this type of smell. So our recommendation is to provide instruments able to balance communication and collaboration in order to optimize the community health. As for the black cloud, we found that metrics related to the cohesion of the community can help to decrease the variability, since maybe you can involve more developers within the communication. But on the other side, the presence of developers previously involved in the community smell lead to a reduction of the chance of black cloud being stable. So our recommendation in this case is to carefully monitor developers that have been previously involved in the community smell in order to not reiterate this behavior that may cause new sources of social and technical debt. As for the lone wolf, we found that involving more developers, including the non-core ones, can decrease the variability of the smell, but on the other side, increasing of the developer in both communication and collaboration network leads to increase the chance of the stability of the smell. Our recommendation in this case, we know that lone wolf is strictly connected with the community structure and cohesion of the team. But of course, something needs to be done in order to understand and devising approaches and recommendations that can help the community to be more cohesive and mitigate the lone wolf. Finally, as for the radio silence, we saw that metrics related to the creation of cohesive subgroups can be useful to decrease the variability of this community smell, but on the other side, the metrics related to the presence of sponsored developers have high correlation with the increase of the variability, because maybe these type of developers can be more authoritative in a way and can interpose him or herself in every single communication. So our recommendation in this case is to analyze and study more the personality of developers. So we need instruments to understand better developer personality and better profile them. So our final remarks based on the results that we obtain are the following. Communication is the key factor for reducing social debt. Indeed, I think that you find a common pattern here where communication metrics are really useful to decrease the variability of a community smell. Increasing collaboration network is not a golden hammer. See the result of radio silence organizational silo. Community evolution as a multi-objective problem. We need to consider the problem of the presence of community smell not from only a communication aspect, but also from a collaboration aspect. So we need to consider different aspects and together. Learning not to reiterate community smell. This is very important. So we need to understand the real situation, why people previously involved in a community smell try to reiterate this behavior. So we need to understand that this behavior in a way should be correct. We need to know and we need to learn how to not reiterate the community smell. And finally, radio silence teach us that personality matters. So we need to consider more personality aspect and metrics if we want to understand better how we can mitigate community smell. That's it. Here are some references of the work and hope you enjoyed this webinar.